Welcome into another edition of the Draft Academy podcast. Your host, Brandon Kravitz here, and today's guest put together quite the career in the National Football League. He played 17 years and won a Super Bowl with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, the one and only Brad Johnson. Brad, thanks for taking the time to do this with me. How's life?
Yeah, life's good, Brandon. I appreciate you reaching out. We'll have some fun here, telling some stories. But life's good, man. Got two boys that play at North Carolina, and then my wife and we live in Athens, Georgia, and been married 25 years. So life's good.
Yeah, and that's great to hear. And I definitely want to ask about Max at some point during the interview, so we'll definitely get to that. You've been out of the game for a minute. Are you well beyond the point where you miss it? Have you gotten over that hump?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I finished my career when I was 40 years old. And when I was done, I still wanted to play. But what kind of helped me get out of the game, honestly, was I had some injuries that I couldn't overcome. I had some knee issues. I couldn't run anymore. Had some arm issues. I couldn't really throw it the way I wanted to throw. So it helped me to just say I couldn't play anymore. I was done. If I physically could have played, I would have played another 5 years. And so when I got out the first month or so, I'm like, man, what am I doing? Like I didn't know what to do, honestly. And because I felt like I needed to be working out every day with a mission and, trying to accomplish something, And then I got involved coaching high school, middle school, and my kids at that time, youth age, football, baseball, basketball. I was on every kind of field, sending out parent emails and coaching more teams than you can imagine. And we started up a league called 6 a.m. Early Risers. It was a basketball league, just the old guys, 6 a.m. to 7 a.m., playing basketball twice a week. I was commissioner, made jerseys, nicknames for everybody. And so by saying that, that was kind of my competitive juice. And I had some place to go, guys, a group to be a part of. Because once you leave professional football, it's different, Brandon. I mean, honestly, like you know, I know it's a long-winded answer here, but like, what you're missing is a team, a locker room, something to play for, something like you don't have 80,000 people cheering or booing for you. You don't feel that competitive edge just quite the same. So you miss those kind of things, the long hours of getting ready and just the fulfillment of just what it feels like to throw that pass and throw that touchdown, and what it feels like to walk after a game with a win or loss, man. It's as high as it gets and lows it gets. So it was tough, but I found myself so active doing those other things. That's what helped me get out of it.
Yeah, and I mean that's why I ask. I know that I've never played at the professional level. I can only imagine the rush that you get, the camaraderie that you have with the teammates, and then the way the fans are engaged in every little thing that you do. There really is nothing to replace that. And by the way, as far as long-winded answers go, we are on a podcast here that stretches 30 minutes. Okay. I live for long-winded answers, so you're all good with me, Brad. And it is amazing. Gotcha. I feel like we are on. I think I'm on a 3-episode. We do 1 episode a week here. I'm on a 3-episode streak at the least of players who got out of the game that went into coaching at the youth level as their next move. It seems like that's the next logical step. You guys get a little bit older, you start families, and then how can you stay in the game, still feel productive? And I mean, it's so different, but I guess it does fill that void. There seems to be a trend brewing here on the podcast.
Well, my kids at that time they were like 8 and 9 years old, that kind of thing. So it was easy for me to make that transition as far as coaching their teams, having their kids over for, parties and swimming parties and those kind of things. And so there I was carrying a red wagon with water coolers and a bunch of balls, going to Academy and Dick's Sporting Goods, buying a bunch of balls and trying to figure out how to order uniforms and all those kind of things. And
I'm sure the dads and the other dads on the team they probably geeked out over the fact that you were the coach, I would imagine.
Yeah, it works out good, but it's always that thing too. If you're not playing their kid as much, then you got to deal with the parents too. So I always had I'll be honest with you, I always had I put a lot of time into my parent meetings at the beginning of the year just to set the tone straight that I was fair for every kid, going to teach every kid as well as I could. I wanted each kid to have a great experience. I wanted each kid to be a part of a winning team, hopefully. I want to teach safety, but then want each kid to come back the next year and be a part of something. So that was kind of the goals with those things. And but I loved it, and there I was. I'd find myself, especially as the kids got a little bit older, Saturday mornings when everybody's going to college football games, I was going to youth football games. I was scouting other teams, So I mean, it was real. And then you find other people. They had the cameras out there filming people. I'm like, that's what do we, Spygate to its finest. But I'm
Right.
not. I wasn't doing that out there. I was actually taking notes on teams, and just you want to give every kid a chance to be successful. He did it, but as a coach, I want to give every kid a chance to be a part of how practices should be ran. Talk about team, encourage someone besides yourself, those kind of things, and just try to teach those values to those kids at an early stage, and hopefully have an impact on those kids once they got older.
It sounds like the job of being a professional quarterback is so meticulous, so detail oriented. You can't take a day off from the grind that goes into it, and so you've got to put your all into that. And it sounds like just it's the way that you wired your brain, and that's sort of what kept going. That's what it sounds like to me. That's really what the transition was about. How can I be meticulous about something else? Does that sound accurate?
Yeah, it is. It very is. And, I got to give credit to my parents and my middle school coaches and high school coaches, because I had really good coaching, like how to run teams, how to practice, how to be a part of something special, and that's what I want to give back to these kids. Like, you can go, unfortunately for some kids, you can go to some parks and watch kids practice. They got no chance of having success, no chance of winning. I'm not saying winning is important, but it's like you don't even have a chance with the drills and the way you're being taught, like from the get-go. Like, honestly, if you went to Deion Sanders, he'd tell you the same thing. He's go to parks and watch people teach his own kids. He's like, why am I letting these guys coach my kids when I'm better than them? Why not do it? And that's how he got involved coaching, kids at 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. Now he's a college coach. But that's the way I was too. And as far as playing the quarterback position, it's a lot more than just throwing spirals. You can find people that can go to a carnival and throw balls at milk cartons, and they can see how fast they can throw a ball. Playing the quarterback position, you got to be able to, you got to be able to think, you got to be able to throw, you got to be able to lead, those kind of things. And so it's everything. Sometimes everything but just throwing a ball. It's how you call playing a huddle. Axe, double right, spear, Larry, 735H, pumped up, Cadence on 2. Like, how do you get it across? And you need expert protection. You tell your back to get to a certain place where you might find him as your 4th or 5th eligible. And so you want to be on top of things like that.
What play did you just call right there? Could you explain that one to me? Do you know?
Yeah.
Or are you just spitting out? Are you just spitting out football jargon? Or was that an actual play?
That's just jargon, I guess. But it's with football plays, there's actually usually called a shift, a formation, a motion, a play with a protection or a run scheme, maybe a kill to the second play, and then the snap count. So it could be U shift to green left west, F short, spider 2 Y banana, Z over, heads up for 359 smoke, heads up check for H2 Miami, one of those kind of things. So it's a lot, but when you practice those things in a huddle and you're in meetings all the time, every word means something. And that you want to be able to get that across to your team as a quarterback.
That's amazing. I mean, I would imagine that things slip through the cracks pretty easily when you put that much verbiage into a play. Was that a common problem where you got a guy sitting on the edge of the huddle that's like, I missed the banana part of what you just spat out?
Yeah, and if you miss that banana part, you're going to get hit in the head. You know what I mean? You're going to slip on the banana peel, man.
Right.
So something bad is going to happen. But I learned a lesson when I first went into my first huddle in 1992 in training camp. I got in the huddle, and I remember the first play was double right check with me. I'm like, Coach, check what? Like, what are the three checks? And, later on, there's the three staple plays. There's Charlie 10 hitch, Scram 55, or Silver 81. And you had three checks you could get to. But then when I try to call a long play in the huddle, my first practice at training camp at Mankato State for the Minnesota Vikings, there was this guy named Mike Tice. And Mike Tice, he kind of grabbed me. He didn't grab me by the throat, but he grabbed me by the shoulder pads. He said, "Son, if you ever step in that huddle again and can't call the play, you're not going to have respect of the offensive guys. You'll never play in this league, and it's not a good thing." So it kind of made you learn how to spit out the words correctly, command the huddle. And then Mike Tice, he ended up playing He played in the NFL for a long time, for 10 or 12 years, and later he became the head coach of the Minnesota Vikings. So we were teammates, and later he brought me back in 05, I think, 04 or 05 to the Vikings, and then was my head coach. So there was a lot of respect there, but a learning lesson. Sometimes older guys can get onto the younger guys, man. Know your stuff when you get in the huddle.
You mentioned the cerebral part of the game. It seems like early on in the NFL season, we've really seen that play itself out. I think maybe by now you're starting to see some of the athleticism of these quarterbacks take hold, the way that a guy like Caleb Williams is starting to thrive. But those first few weeks of the season, it was Derek Carr, it was Baker Mayfield, it was Geno Smith. It was guys that have been in the league that understand the nuance of the position. Do you pay attention to the current product? And did you notice something similar early in the season, that the guys that had been playing quarterback for years and maybe even stumbled a little bit, Sam Darnold, a good example of that have been able to thrive because of their knowledge base?
Yeah, it's an interesting call on how you evaluate quarterbacks. I think toughness and adversity, being able to deal with it, is a big deal. I think two parts for kids now. I think quarterbacks are more developed at an early age because they do 7-on-7. It's almost become year-round sports. Kids aren't really able to play three sports like we did back in the day. Some play two, mostly just play one as a whole, majority, I would say. But I think kids are better prepared as far as knowledge going to the football route for quarterbacks, like just understanding systems, coverages, steps, those kind of things. And used to just playing in front of big crowds, playing on ESPN in high school these days. I mean, you're not, no moment's too big. But I also feel like kids are also thrown. There's a little bit of sometimes kids, they haven't had to deal with adversity enough. So some of these young kids, and a lot of these quarterbacks now, they've had success this year, but sometimes they don't know how to deal with it at an early age. When you look at like maybe a Sam Darnold, right when he first came to the Jets, he struggled. First pick or second pick of the draft, and Mark Sanchez, he had like 6 different coordinators in his first 7 years of his career. They're great talent, but hadn't had to deal with adversity. And then over time, they deal with it. Now Sam Darnold's finally he's on his 4th team, but he kind of got a chance. He's ready. He's dealt with adversity. Now he's ready for that moment. So I think there's just a grooming part of, sometimes I think kids, when I look at Super Bowl champion quarterbacks like Aaron Rodgers, he sat for 3 years behind Brett Favre, and Tom Brady sat behind Drew Bledsoe, and I sat for a few years. And Brett Favre, he actually sat a couple of years before he started. Steve Young, he sat behind Joe Montana. And I mean, the list goes on of quarterbacks. Kurt Warner, he sat.
Brady.
Eli Manning, he sat behind. Yeah, I mean, the list goes on. But I think sometimes there's a grace period. I think you got to have to develop these quarterbacks. Not only just from a maturity standpoint, being with older players, learning systems, learning protections, because sometimes those things aren't as a high level in college as they are at the next level in the pros. And so I think there's just a development stage. I think we're throwing kids in there a little bit too fast sometimes. Just give them time and let the future be the future. It doesn't have to be today. When a kid's ready to play, then let him play.
Yeah, we're moving at such a fast pace these days when it comes to that, throwing these guys to the wolves. When you look at the way that things came together in 2002 and that famous Super Bowl run that you had, what was it that you were most proud of from that season, either on an individual level or as a football team?
Well, it was obviously it was an incredible year. We ended up winning the Super Bowl. John Gruden had just gotten the job, and I remember when he first brought me into his office. I remember he said, "Brad, we're going to win the Super Bowl this year." And he said, how's John Lynch and Warren Sapp and Rondé Barber and Simeon Rice, how are they going to blast off the Joker right X short 22X drive halfback burst? How's Monty Kiffin going to deal with that? We're going to declare war on our defense every day. And what he did is he made it competitive. He brought in a bunch of free agents that year also. Keenan McCardell and Joe Jarrett Vicious and Ricky Dudley and Ken Dilger and Robin Oben and Michael Pittman. Like the list goes on of guys. So we kind of upgraded a lot especially on our offensive side. But he challenged our defense in different ways too. He said, "Listen, you guys have been great, but you haven't done this. You haven't been able to stop these two formations. You haven't been able to stop the St. Louis Rams. Like you haven't been able to beat the Philadelphia Eagles. There's certain things." So he challenged both sides of the ball, and he brought in a lot of talent. Had some great coaches, and the challenge that year was to go 3-1 every 4 games, which equaled out to be 12-4. But that year, I think just learning his system was challenging. The demand that it took to understand the plays, the protections, the audibles that he wanted, and just being on the same page with him. We developed over time that year, and we got hot, especially in the second half of the season. But that year, I ended up cracking my ribs. Dealt with some injuries that year. Was able to overcome that. But I think one of the biggest things that John Gruden brought was, kind of what I said earlier, was the belief that we're going to win it. Not just, we always thought maybe the moment's too big. Like, can you win it or not? And looking back in my career, I'd never won a state championship, never won a national college championship, and then Super Bowl. And the NFL had been in the league for that time 10 or 11 years. So it made the playoffs, but hadn't won it. And no one on that team, not a coach, not a player, had won it. So I think the belief that we could actually do it. And then we got hot at the right time of the year, late in December, overcame some injuries. Out of back injury at the very end of the season. Was fortunate enough we won the division, got a bye, and that was a big deal. But just I think the belief that he brought to each one of us individually and then as a team, and then just got to come through. Got to be good, but got to be lucky too. And kind of we had all the right breaks.
Man, if you haven't learned anything yet listening to the first several minutes of this podcast, it's the mental side of the game, understanding it, putting the work in, and then the belief. I mean, it is crazy how much what we've talked about is all between the ears. What about the physical side of that season? Is there anything that you can harken back to say maybe you did as a team a little bit differently in preparing yourselves? You mentioned the competitiveness, but what about on the training side as far as getting ready for the grind of that season and the belief that this could be our year? Was there anything that you guys did differently when it came to the weight room or training or anything along those lines?
Well, it's kind of broken up in a couple parts for that. I think one, in the off season, a lot of times that's a do-it-yourself project. You have a couple months here and there where you're individually just working out, so you're getting better on your own, or whether you're recovering from injuries or just the rest it takes from the prior year. But when John Gruden came in, he came with his hair was on fire now, So the season is long. It starts in all the OTAs and mini camps, starting back in April and May and June. You get about 3 or 4 weeks off, and then you start training camp. We had training camp in Orlando, and you go through 4 or 5 preseason games, and then you go through a 16-game regular season. Then you go through the playoffs. I mean, you're equaling like 23, 24 games when it's all said and done. Those are weeks of practices. So I think the biggest thing, not so much just the physical work that year. I think it was just we had a lot of guys that dealt with injuries during the season. Every team is. I cracked my ribs. I had a lower back injury. We had Kerry Jenkins played on a broken foot. Robin Oben played on a broken hand. I mean, so you had everybody with different injuries, and we were just able to get through that. But I think what set it apart was kind of going back to, I don't know if we could have worked any harder. I don't think we could do that. I think the biggest thing was just being more mentally prepared. The defense had been together under Monty Kiffin for quite a few years. So I think they were more at the top of the mountain with them as far as how far they could go. And it was just like, can they take that extra step and, reach the top of Pikes Peak, man? Or, what I mean? Like, can you get to the top of the mountain and Mount Everest? And they did. And for us offensively, we started at a lower level because we had to learn a whole new system. We had a lot of new players. So we pretty much started from ground zero. And so I think the biggest intent what I'm talking about is just the amount of focus we had in the meetings, the walkthrough practices, not just the actual physical practice, but the walkthroughs. Those are as much mental as anything. So I think that, and then the part of believing that we could actually do it was a big deal.
When it came to staying healthy for you, did you have a go-to, like, I got to do this if I'm going to maintain my health or battle through an injury? Anything from stretching to veggies to sleep, supplements? Was there something that you always relied on to help you get through a strenuous season?
Yeah, I think when you're young, it's you're just young. You don't get tired. You
You
know what I
wake
mean?
up and you're ready to go.
Yeah, you're ready to go. Teach your body who's boss. You're going. Man. Go play golf after practice. Those kind of things. But as you get older, things do change. Um, from definitely whether it's sleep, especially your day off was on Tuesdays, getting more rest then, having to deal with family members that would come in. They'd come in on Friday, Saturday. Like sometimes you'd have to. My wife did a great job as far as picking them up at the airport and entertaining them, where I didn't have to do those kind of things. Like finding rest was a big deal. Um, Lifting, I always would spend money. I always during the season. Um, I always made sure I worked out with my legs twice a week, like in the weight room. So I did legs on Mondays and Wednesdays. And then and then sometimes I'd ride my bike on Tuesdays on the day off, just to stay fresh. And then upper body, I would always work out on upper bodies was always Mondays and Thursdays. And then I would do like just a light little thing with rotator cuff and stuff on Fridays. But the biggest thing for me was just being, uh, more than anything, was just being rested because it was you get exhausted from one game and then the next game comes around so fast the next week and you learn kind of a bunch of new plays and a bunch of all the practice, the workload, and what's changed during time now. Like when we played, we would do training camp would be two days for 4 weeks. Like it was now they don't do that. Now they'll have maybe one practice and then maybe a walkthrough in the afternoon. And so it wasn't. I don't think it's quite as strenuous now. Back, is the whole thing back in the day is, no pain, no gain, and now it's too much pain, no brain. You know what I mean? It's kind of those things.
Yeah. Are
So
you
it pays
envious
cost.
of that?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, careers are longer. They take better care of players with the rules that have been made. The what they provide now in the cafeterias and all the nutrition stuff that goes on in the off season. It's completely different from where guys are. And guys have done a better job as far as learning from others, watching others have longer careers, more successful careers, especially probably with the nutrition part of it and oxygen tanks and chiropractors and massages and all those kind of things.
I know your son Max had a season-ending injury early in the season. It was heartbreaking to see that happening now with the Tar Heels. How is he recovering from the broken leg?
Yeah, Max he's doing really good. So first game of the season, for those people that don't know, he had an injury, and my wife Nikki and I were sitting in the stands, and you always think it's some other player. And so he's down there, like somebody says, it's your son. I'm like, holy cow. I mean, okay. And then more people, more coaches, and you see doctors come out there, and then didn't know what it was, And so 1 minute you're trying to win a game in the fourth quarter, and next thing you know, you're outside looking for a ride to the hospital. So Max, that night, he actually snapped his femur. So that's your big bone on his right leg is where he snapped. And then so you're making decisions in the hospital. So they put a rod into it. And so he's come out pretty good right now. He's still on crutches. We're helping out with him here in Chapel Hill, just helping him drive and get around and those kind of things. And he'll have full recovery. Should be playing in the spring and all those kind of things. But it's heartbreaking to see any kid get through any injury. But Max is doing well. And, you work so hard to get there, then all of a sudden it's taken away from you as far as playing. But he's doing great. He's doing great right now. Look forward to him get back to playing.
Yeah, I'm sure that I would imagine that was tougher than any injury that you ever experienced. You sitting there in the stands and watching your son go through that.
Yeah, it really is. And so, as so many times as we're sitting in the stands, or you're watching a game on TV and you see somebody go down, and you're like, well, okay, commercial break. Well, now I'm like, that's somebody's kid.
Yeah.
That's some player that's going to change someone's career. It's going to change lives. as far as a lot of things. And all of a sudden, it's never been our kid. Now it's our kid. You're having to deal with something serious, And we just thank God he's healthy now and be full recovered. And look forward to him coming back. But it's like if you do anything, you're gonna have to deal with injuries over time, and that's part of the game. It's what you sign up for. But it's like it's not just football. It's every sport. It kind of comes with the territory, and hopefully you can dodge the big bullets.
Well, and it speaks to his toughness that he would go through something that has to be one of the more painful injuries you can experience on a football field. And I guess he's already talking about coming back because here you are saying next year he's going to be a full go in the spring. So was it ever even a thought that he would not play again just to not have to live through something like that?
Well, you still got to go through all that. But it's like he said, they're pulling him off on a cart. And, a lot of people, they'll give a thumbs up saying they're okay. Well, he wasn't giving a thumbs up. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not okay. And it's okay to deal with their emotions and feelings and those things. But I'll say this. So thoughtful. We were so thankful, especially in the hospital, of like people texting us, all the shout outs on social media, all the prayers that were taking place, because we needed them all. And we had a great doctor there in Minneapolis, Dr. Templeman, that took care of him. And it's still a long recovery to come through, but he's heading in the right direction. You can see positive signs that things will be okay.
That's awesome. All right, let's wrap with this. Talk to me about these trick shots. How did this start? Yeah. I'm seeing these on social media now, or you've got these incredible trick shots that you're performing. How did you become so damn good at this?
I have fun with it. So basically during the pandemic, our kids were on TikTok and they were doing dance videos and stuff like that. And I got on there and I said, I can do some of this. I can't dance, but I started making videos of my playing career or workouts or those kind of things. But I said, I can throw a football and I can shoot basketball. So I started making these videos and then I started having fun, like trying to make it competitive edge. What we were talking about earlier. So I started trying to make a series of 3, 4, maybe 5 shots in a row, shooting over the backboard, bouncing it, spinning it back, shoot off my finger, and then throw a football the length of the court and make them. So it's pretty wild when you see it. But it's things that I have fun doing it. I share it with everybody. And things I did as like a little 10-year-old kid, now I just kind of take it to the next level. And usually on Twitter every week, post a fun Friday trick shot of the day. So you can find it all on there.
That's awesome. Is that is the handle at Brad Johnson? How can we find that?
Yeah, on Twitter it's Brad_Johnson_14. And there's there's a lot of shots on there, a lot of fun. I got a crazy one getting ready to come out. It's either going to be this Friday or the next Friday. So just hold on to your seats.
All right. Well, I'm definitely going to help push that out. He was a 17-year pro, a Super Bowl champion, and now he's a trick shot master. Brad Johnson, our guest this week. Thanks so much for the time, Brad. I really appreciate it.
No, I appreciate it, Brandon. Best of luck, man. Thank you, buddy.
Back at it next week with another edition of the Draft Academy podcast. I've been your host, Brandon Kravitz. Till next